Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, Voices of the Ancient Literature. My name is Jonier Morales, and today we will explore one of the most fascinating chapters in literature history, that is Romanticism and Transcendentalism. I'm with my friends Alison, Andres, and Mar, and they will guide us through different perspectives of these movements. So we will start with a little overview of the British Romanticism and then move to the American one. And then with Transcendentalism, and at the end we will make a comparison between the literature movements and an analysis of some selected poems and excerpts. So let's move on to the British Romanticism. In this period, this movement emerged at the end of the 18th century, right after the Enlightenment, and during the Industrial Revolution almost. So, yes, the Industrial Revolution brought progress in society, but it also caused a lot of pollution and a sense of dehumanization. So, in response of that, writers and poets also sought to recover emotion, the freedom called individuality, and a deeper bond between human people and nature. So, one of the main themes of this movement was the celebration of the nature. Nature was one of the most used things during Romanticism in England. So, it wasn't used not just like a background, the scenario, but also like a living force that shaped human life. That nature also reflected like the emotions of people too. So Romanticism also highlighted emotions and the imagination. So one of the main figures of this movement was William Wordsworth, that placed nature at the center of human life, and in a time when industriality was emerging significantly, so it was basically like mm, his view was like natural world was a source of comfort and also wisdom. So almost it was almost like a guide for a human soul. So what he did was that he was against the elitist style of society and its poetry, and instead of following that rules, he chose to write in a simple language, and he used ordinary people as main characters or subjects in his poetry. So doing so, he emphasized that true emotion and reflection could be found even in rural life, and the people also there had their own individuality, and the way of think of them was different. So, on the other side, we have Samuel Coleridge, and he explored another side of Romanticism. So, in his literature, he used imagination and the mystery. So, while society was focused on reason and progress, he was against of that, and he believed that imagination reveals the truth that even logic couldn't. So he often erased those connections between reality and fantasy. So he showed that even supernatural could help people to reflect on guilt, the redemption of people, and also the relation that people had with nature. That is a very important topic that Romanticism emphasizes. And finally, we have Pierre Shelley, that represented the rebellious spirit of Romanticism. And for him, poetry wasn't just beauty, because it was also a tool for challenge. So, for example, a poem that represented that was Prometheus Unbound. And there he reimagines the main character as a symbol of resistance against the tyranny of society and the representation of hope for human freedom. So it's remarkable to mention that Shelley believed that poets could inspire humanity to challenge against the oppression. And what we can find is that all these British romantic reflected in their poetry with real human emotions, imagination going to the limits of supernatural. And that's Romanticism became into a new way of understanding human beings and the relationship that they have with the world. So now let's move to American Side Story, and welcome, Alison. tell us about the American Romanticism. That's a very interesting topic that it's related to this one.
Okay, so firstly, we have to take into account that American Romanticism was a cultural movement that was developed in the 19th century. It was driven by the desire of find an unique identity, especially after the independence of the United States in 1776. So, although it also emerged in Europe, as Steven said, this movement in America established like its own characteristics, and yeah, this make us wonder why themes such as nature, emotions, and individuality were central to the writings of the period. For this, we have to go back to 1776. So, having gained its independence from Great Britain, the United States began to expand and incorporate new territories and facing the challenges of establishing this unique identity that I mentioned before. So they wanted to remove its European heritage. This process of forming its national identity led intellectuals to search for a truthful American cultural expression distinct from the Europe one. Then, another important factor was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, which changed people's life. Cities grew, and people worked in factories instead of in their homes, and many felt lost due to the quick advancement of technology and urbanization. So, in this environment, nature was seen as a safe place, a place of purity and freedom, and a way to face the industrialization of the time. This can be reflected in works of the period. Authors such Emerson and Thoreau saw a greater connection with nature, distinct themselves from the urban life, and championing self-sufficiency and independent thought. Meanwhile, authors such Edgar Allan Poe and Nathaniel Hawthorne explore the macabre of the dark, addressing the most intense human emotions like madness and guilty and desire and fear, etc., etc. Thus, American Romanticism became a response to the challenges of a young nation seeking to find its place in this big world. Through the literature and art, they sought to express the essence of freedom, human emotions, and the connection with unexplored territories, both physically and spiritually. Well, now I'm going to emphasize in two important authors that I mentioned before. There are Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. They were part of a philosophical and literary movement called American Transcendentalism that emerged as well in the early 19th century. Its central idea was that human beings and nature are deeply connected, and that truth and knowledge can be found through intuition rather than only through logic or tradition. These two authors argued that individuals should trust themselves, live simply, and seek a spiritual ground outside of the materialism. They also valued nature as a source of inspiration and moral guidance. This movement influenced American literature, politics, and even early environmental thoughts, encouraging people to challenge conformity and embrace personal freedom. So, now that we have a more general idea about how the same movement was carried out into two different places, I think that we can do a deeper analysis about it. So, Andres, we will talk about us the similarities and differences between both movements.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much, Alison. Well, let's make this comparison. When we talk about British Romanticism and American Romanticism, the first thing to say is that they share the same heart. Both movements value nature, imagination, and emotion over reason. Both see individual experience as a way to arrive at a deeper truth. But the difference is very interesting, so pay attention. In England, Romanticism was primarily poetic. Writers such as Wordsworth, Keats, and Shelley explored the sublime in nature. Nature, as for example mountains, rivers, or skies. Their tone was often contemplative, even melancholic, with strong reflection on the beauty and science of life. But, in contrast, in the United States, Romanticism adopted its own style. Remember that it was a young nation, okay? And still under construction and constantly searching for its own identity. So nature was not just sublime landscape, it was a symbol of freedom and of its own national identity. In addition, the genres were more varied, including not only poetry but also short stories, also essays or novels, for example. And here is a fascinating and interesting detail. The tone of American Romanticism was divided into two extremes. On one hand, there was a bright and celebratory Romanticism such as that of Walt Whitman, which exalted democracy, the common man, and on the other hand, there was a dark and gothic Romanticism with authors such as the famous Edgar Allan Poe, who explored death, madness, and the supernatural. So, in summary, while British Romanticism focused on poetry and the sublime nature, the American Romanticism took those ideas and transformed them into a voice of its own, one that was more diverse, more closely linked to national identity, and much more open to both the light and the shadow of the human soul.
Those are good points, Andres. Well, to finish this, let's call Mar, who is going to analyze the poems and the excerpts of these movements. So go ahead, Mar.
Thank you, Stephen. One of the representative poems of American Romanticism is the Rodora by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and for the British side, we have I Wander Lonely as a Cloud by William Wordsworth. Both poems show how each movement gave it to its own meaning to nature. The Rodora is about a simple flower in the woods, which Emerson used to suggest that beauty exists for its own sake, even without an audience. Meanwhile, Wordsworth's poems tell how the student visions of a field of daffodils with fills the poem with joy and memory that keeps inspiring him later in moments to solitude. So, if we look at the poems themselves, what words I Wander Lonely as a Cloud has a very regular rhythm. It follows a steady meter and rhythm, almost like a song, which makes its sounds musical smooth. That style really matches the British romantic way to see nature as something sublime and inspiring. In this case, the daffodils are not just simple flowers, they turn into swords of joy and creativity. That says, with the poet even the moment has passed. And on the other hand, Emerson's The Rodora feels freer in its form. The lines don't always have the same length or rhythm. So it reads more like a reflection or meditation than a song. That's a very typical of American Romanticism, which didn't want to follow European models so strictly. And then it also different. Instead of showing nature as something grand and sublime, Emerson takes a small, modest flower and gives it a deep meaning. He reminds us that beauty has value on its own, even if no one is there to see it.
Thank you guys for your insights and to all of you for listening. This was Voices of the Ancient Literature, and see you next time. Bye.